Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar here with the New York State Broadcast Association. Here we're talking about the connected vehicle today and what does that actually mean for radio inside of the car. I wanted to start off by thanking David and the team for having us join and do this webinar. Hopefully you'll find the time well spent. We'll talk a little bit about the car, what's going on today in the vehicle and how things are evolving and some of the things that we're doing in this space that we think are very exciting for broadcast radio. To get it started, this meeting is verified. Yeah, it is being recorded. So we'll share this with David and the team that can be shared with the team afterwards to view it again. To kick it off, to set the stage, when I think of the connected car, I think of the connected car as a vehicle that has connectivity inside of the car. So it has an embedded modem inside of the vehicle or can utilize the internet connection from the paired-in mobile device. So that's what we're talking about when I think about the connected vehicle when I talk about it. One second here. In addition, anybody who has any questions, feel free. Everyone's muted and put into just kind of view mode for the webinar. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A box or let me know, just use it in the chatter and we'll go ahead and answer them in real time as we come about them. So with that said, I am going to go in and start sharing my screen. All right. So let's get it started. So as I mentioned, the connected vehicle is a vehicle that's got IP connectivity or an embedded modem inside of the car. A quick who we are to give some context of what we've been doing. For those of you who are aware of Xperi, we've been doing HD radio for a little over 20 years, legacy ubiquity, that's where I'm from. But we do a lot when it comes to technology for broadcast radio. Specifically in the car, we've been focused around HD radio and recently AutoStage. And these are some of the other things that we do. Over those last 2 decades for automotive, when it comes to HD radio, we've deployed a little over 125 million vehicles with Xperi technologies, with close to the majority of that being HD radio. Our teams have been working with automotive manufacturers at all levels. So we've been working with them, speaking to their teams on the deployment of radio technology in the vehicle, specifically here in North America and globally. In addition to that, we've been talking to their tier 1 suppliers around radio technology and working through the integration. For those of you who are not aware, most automotive manufacturers don't actually produce a vehicle. They actually design, do the product development, all of that sort, and outsource all of the development of all the different components. And these tier 1 suppliers that I've listed here on the right are the companies that we actually work with that build kind of that center stack, that radio component, that larger, greater piece. It's not just about the radio, but it's all of that little entertainment, infotainment package that's in there. And so we work with them as well. And they play a critical role in the whole development of technology inside of the vehicle. Several years ago, we started to hear some discussions from automotive manufacturers around what else can radio do? What else can radio do outside of just analog radio or HD radio? The need for more content to the vehicle was starting to be raised more, and the desire to add additional elements to radio inside of the car was increasing. And I'll get to a little bit more about what that means and why that's important. But several years ago, we've noticed that the conversation was shifting and that we had to start looking at some other things. As many of you are well aware, these are some of the vehicles on the road today, but as you all are aware, the screens inside of the car are increasing in size. They are all various sizes, but it's clear that they're all getting larger. We've got some examples here of a Tesla, of a Jeep vehicle, Subaru, Ford, BMW, and Hyundai. And again, these are all vehicles that are on the road today that you can see for yourselves. The car, we looked at the previous slide, we were looking at radios and the vehicles today. but the car is really is evolving. This is from Sony. Sony is launching the Vision S vehicle, and they've got screens from pillar to pillar, showcasing the content and showcasing just other elements of the vehicle. The reason to show something like this, and the reason to feature this or talk about this, is what this means from a, I'll say, technology solution coming to the vehicle sort of perspective, is that we need to populate these screens with content. The user experience inside of the car is becoming super, super critical. It's imperative that solutions and technologies that are delivered to the vehicle to deliver a compelling user experience. And when I'm talking about a user experience, I'm talking about they're not putting these screens inside of the car for the screens to be blank, for them to remain empty, for there to be very little detail or a giant blank screen, right? They want to populate this with content that gives a great user experience inside of the vehicle. Obviously in safe ways and all of that with driver distraction and things, but keeping it in a safe manner. This vehicle actually, I believe they're slated to release it next year or within the next 2 years, I believe. So this is something that should be forthcoming pretty soon. Another rendering as well is, this is from Byton. This was an electric vehicle startup manufacturer where they have, again, a pillar-to-pillar screen, but a larger one screen kind of scenario. But again, to really convey here how broadcast radio has to deliver more when it comes to the vehicle. Where in this example, what we worked on with Byton was we were able to deliver large, high-resolution station logos when listening to the radio, so that you have this great visual representation of radio inside of the car. Even further, you have Apple CarPlay. So this was released late last year from Apple during their developer conference. This was their rendering of Apple CarPlay and where they eventually see the car going with their technology. As you can see here, there's all sorts of content. There's calendar content, there's current trip content, there's entertainment content. There's all sorts of different elements inside of the vehicle here. This to me captures a good representation of a great user experience, or the user experience inside the car evolving and changing and getting more content to fill these screens to deliver a great experience. The positive here, the first renderings that we've seen from Apple show radio and show that the FM tuner will be accessible. I'm assuming AM as well. Not sure on that one, but that the FM receiver will be available, and I think it's indicated here down here that it's not just all IP delivered content. Just check real quick to see if there are any questions. Feel free to ask away if there's anything that we can chat about. Moving on to that. So I showed some images of the car today. Those 6 other images of what the radio looks like. The screen's getting larger. We showed some of this vehicle and some previous ones where the experience is dramatically changing. When I talk about content being delivered to the car, and we talk about added features and things like that, when it comes to broadcast radio, this is where what we're doing when we talk about DTS AutoStage comes into play. Where when we talk about DTS AutoStage, we think this hybrid radio approach inside of the vehicle is the opportunity for radio. Analog radio, FM, analog radio, HD radio still are limited in what their abilities are to send content to the vehicle, right? Analog, you can obviously send the audio for the broadcast. You can send the RDS metadata. With HD radio, again, you can do the digital audio. You can do the pad data, so you can do the expanded song artists and album titles. And then you can also do the station logos and album art and things like that. So you still have the visual representation, but you're still somewhat limited in that, right? The images are certain pixelation and that sort of thing. And that's just the nature of broadcast technology. So our approach is this hybrid. approach. And we launched this with Mercedes a few years ago. And we're still using broadcast radio, FM, AM audio for the delivery, AM and FM for the delivery of the audio. But we're using the IP connection to come over the top to improve on the experience overall. And we'll take a look at that in a second and what that means. And the whole idea here is that this makes the user experience, this adds to the overall experience for broadcast radio inside of the vehicle. And then the other benefits too, which we'll highlight towards the end on metrics and things like that. As I mentioned, this was launched with Mercedes. And so these are vehicles that are on the road, especially in the state of New York. I'm sure, have got some markets that are pretty strong for Mercedes. And these are vehicles that you can go to a dealership and see. And this is what that starts to look like inside of the car. So when you get into a Mercedes with this hybrid approach of radio and IP connectivity, you have this carousel of logos on the FM where you can scroll through and you see station logos for every station that you can tune into. So you have this visual representation for every station in the market. Obviously, with HD radio, you can deliver this, but if you're analog, you're not able to deliver this sort of content to the vehicle. You're not able to deliver a station logo, artist images, things like that to the vehicle. In addition to station logos and kind of the station names and things, we're also able to add in now playing metadata. So metadata around what's actually being played on the radio, but then also adding imagery apologies, adding imagery to the song that you're listening to, adding album art, adding artist images, things like that to the experience for the listener. We launched with Mercedes. We've also launched with Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis, and an additional brand, and I'll show you in a second. So we're up to 5 total brands that have launched. And this is an implementation where with Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis, where again, we're still using that over-the-air audio for FM or AM, or we're using the AM and FM for broadcast of audio, but then we're using the IP connection to come over the top to add to it. So on the right side, what you see here is the now playing metadata, where we're using the over-the-air signal for the audio. You've got the now playing metadata below the imagery, and then you've got the imagery coming across the top. If you're broadcasting in HD, you already get all of that imagery and you get all of that kind of expanded text. But if you're analog, you don't have that ability without that internet connection. And then on the right side, we're using the IP connection to expand what a station list can actually show inside of the vehicle, where you have station logos for all of the radio stations that you can tune to. You have the station name, you have the station slogan, things like that, where we're taking advantage of that larger screen and adding elements to make radio visually appealing, but also just populating that screen and making it an overall better user experience inside of that car. In addition to those other brands that we talked about, there is another brand that we launched with recently where we're not able to say, but I think you can probably tell who this might be by seeing the images here on the screen. This brand used to use static text for the station, for radio inside of the vehicle. When you turn on the radio inside of the car, you would see frequency and call letters, and it would just be this laundry list of frequency and call letters for radio. So you would turn on the radio, you would see just frequency and call letters and nothing else for that experience. If you got into Spotify, you got into TuneIn, you got into Pandora, you would see everything. You would see album art, you would see all sorts of other elements and features for the experience inside of those IP delivered services. Recently, what they've done is they've utilized AutoStage to now populate station logos for all of the radio stations that can be tuned to. So now, using that IP connection inside of the car, they're actually pulling in imagery for the radio inside of the car. So it's not just about the now playing information, but it's now pulling in station logos. So now when you turn on the radio, you have this more visual, kind of fuller screen, better representation for broadcast radio inside of that vehicle. Today, they're using logos from AutoStage, But as we get further along with deployment with them, we'll expand on other services and features to add to it. And we'll see what some of those are in a second. So we talked a bit about the now playing metadata, station logos, the now playing artwork, things like that. The whole idea here, though, is, and the whole idea of just hybrid in general, is we're using radio, we're using over the air for audio to maximize that, right? We know that broadcast radio is efficient, is effective, is the best way to reach the masses with audio content delivery. But let's now take that internet connection and let's go even further than just kind of visual, now playing, station metadata, things like that. Last year, we launched with Mercedes lyrics to songs on the radio. So you're able to see this lyrics button when you're listening to a song on the radio, and you're able to view the lyrics to the song on the radio. Now, at a certain point, this could seem a little hokey or a little trivial. But what this shows is, and what I think is so amazing about what this is this is the first time broadcast radio has ever been able to deliver a whole new set of features to the vehicle, right? Something that Pandora or Spotify or Amazon Music can deliver. They deliver lyrics they've been doing lyrics for their listeners for years. But this is the first time broadcast radio has ever been able to deliver that sort of content. This is just the first example of how we can take advantage, or how that IP connection inside of the car is an opportunity, right? The idea here is that we use that internet connection to make broadcast radio exciting, engaging, and a compelling user experience inside of that car. In addition to Mercedes, we've also rolled out service following, where you're driving your vehicle, listening to over-the-air broadcast coverage. As you get to the edge of that coverage, having the ability to switch over to the stream and continue listening to that radio station. And then when you get back into the broadcast coverage, take you over to broadcast out of the stream. That's something that's been live with Mercedes for a couple of years now. But what's exciting about this, again, is the delivery of the lyrics and the first step of what we can do. And this is only just the tip of the iceberg. There are tons of ideas around how can we deliver podcast content when you're listening to the radio. If you're listening to, your stations are all, I'm sure, producing a ton of different podcasts and are delivering and creating all new content for every day. If someone's listening to your radio station, how could they then discover yesterday's podcast from your morning show? Right? If they're listening to that station, it's getting maybe to the end of the morning show. Maybe they have the opportunity to listen to yesterday's podcast or another podcast from the station. Or how could, if we're listening to, the local country station, how could they discover events that are coming up in your area based off me being a country fan? How could we engage them in outside of the car and help them to discover other things that are going on in their area based around the type of content that radio station delivers? There are a million different ideas around what we can actually do. Now that we've paired broadcast radio inside of the car with that internet connection, it really does become endless in terms of opportunity. It's really about limiting. The only limitation now is just about development and getting these executed. But that internet connection really does open up the opportunity. Do you have a question? It says, if a station is not part of the IP service, can a Mercedes still tune to a station? It is more difficult to find the station. Yeah, absolutely. So the way that our approach to hybrid has been, when you get into the car and you turn on the radio will work the way a radio normally would. You get on the radio, you turn on to FM, you would get analog radio, you would get HD radio. If you've given the radio or you've given the car the connection to the IP, whether it's the embedded modem and you subscribed, or your paired mobile phone, and that car has the internet connection, then the content from hybrid will then just populate over to the radio. If you've eliminated that connection and that car doesn't have the internet connection, then the radio would function the normal way that a radio would. You would get your normal AM and or FM stations. And if it's HD, you would obviously get your HD radio stations. If it's an analog radio, you would get your analog radio. And that's been the approach. And for us, that's been a strategic approach to it, because what we wanted to make sure was that what consumers love about radio is that it works, it's free. I think some of us might have been on this the Jacobs Brothers webinar yesterday, talking about it's a one touch button and it works, right? It's the same thing, right? You get into FM and that's it. And we wanted to make sure that AutoStage is that same thing, that it's simple to execute, it's as easy for a listener to experience and engage with broadcast radio. And it's not asking someone to go to a different app or do something different or creating confusion, that we're bringing in people to the FM AM experience, and the content then just populates into the car. So we talked a lot about the overall experience inside of the car from a listener's perspective or from a driver's perspective. You have a better user experience in this hybrid environment, utilizing that connection that the connected vehicle provides, and delivering an overall better radio experience, which is great. The other great thing from a broadcaster's perspective is the analytics part. So now with that internet connection to the vehicle, we're actually now able to get communication back from the car. Whereas analog radio and HD radio are one directional, right? You transmit out a signal and the car receives that signal and that's it, right? There's no pipeline coming back and there's no communication back. But that internet connection is two-way, and that internet connection does come back to us with content. And what we're able to now do within DTS AutoStage is we're actually able to populate we're actually able to now extract those metrics and make those metrics available to broadcasters who directly participate in DTS AutoStage. We're able to show you what your listening looks like on a given day. How many sessions have been tuned into your radio station? What's the average listening time of those sessions when they're tuning into your radio station? How it's not necessarily about the unique listeners, but it's more about the unique sessions tuned into the vehicle, right? Getting a better understanding of that, going back and looking at previous days, previous months, and seeing what that listening pattern has actually looked like. Looking at a heat map, being able to see a map of your market and being able to see where the bulk of your listening is coming from on a given day, seeing where are your listeners centered around in a specific part of the market. Are they downtown? Are they on the outskirts? What does that look like? Where are some of the popular areas in your market where they're actually seeing listening? This is all important things to note here. This is all real-time data coming from the vehicle. This is data that arguably the industry has wanted for many years, is to be able to see actual data coming from the vehicle when it's regards to broadcast radio inside of the car. This is nothing to do with any of the streaming audio. This is all over-the-air metrics from the vehicle. We don't have any demographic data. There is no demographic data to know that this is David's Mercedes or this is Juan's Kia. We just know the listening sessions that are happening inside of the car. The benefits of that, it's all protected, from a privacy perspective, and it, keeps everything safe. Over time, does that evolve? We'll sort through and figure that out. The other great thing is that it's completely free to see this data. This data that I'm showing you is live. We launched it about a month ago in May. Yeah, about a month ago or a little over a month ago. We launched this right at the beginning of April, end of March. And it's completely free to stations. All it's required is for you to sign up for DTS AutoStage, get your stations connected, populate the content that's needed, and then the access to the data and access to control your metadata for the automakers that have delivered DTS AutoStage is all there. There's absolutely zero cost to doing it. A common question that will come up in this around costs and things like that, we license the technology to automotive manufacturers, and that's what keeps the lights on here for Experience. That's what keeps the service up and running. That's how we keep everything going. But as a part of participating in the system, what we believe is a great value is to participate in the system. We share these metrics back to you. and you're able to get a little bit better understanding of what's going on in the market. I also would suggest that this is all a subset of the cars in the market. So this in no way should replace anything that you're doing today. This is more complementary, just another tool in the toolbox for any of the other data sets that you're using today, website, app stats, Nielsen data, things like that. All of this is just one other data set to toss in the bucket because this is still a subset of cars in the market. As I mentioned, we launched with 5 brands. Across those 5 brands, it's something like 50, 60 models of vehicles that are on the road today and that are available and that are populating with data. And in some cases with Hyundai Kia, that's between 30, I think it's around 30 models of vehicles. And that alone, I think some of the updates have gone out to 2017 model year vehicles. So there are quite a few vehicles starting to hit the road now or getting updates for their radios that are able to start populating some of this data. As I mentioned, we've launched today. As of today, we've launched with 5 brands. If you've seen some of the trade news earlier this week, we actually announced our 6th brand. It's a Japanese automotive manufacturer. We haven't identified exactly who yet, but they're slated to launch at the end of this year. And then we've got another 2 signed up for this year. The next one should be around this summer. That will, I think, start hitting the road. And then the other one will be later this fall with a potential 4th brand coming on board this year. And then aside from that, over the next 18 months, there are another 3 or 4 brands lined up over the next 18 months to get launched with DTS AutoStage. So there's a lot of momentum around this from an automotive perspective, from a broadcaster's perspective, equally as much momentum around what we're doing in this space. Again, the whole idea here is to use that internet connection to our advantage. Use that connection to make broadcast compelling and to add to the experience that broadcast radio can now deliver to the vehicle. See a question here. Can you reflect on the eliminating AM reception in EVs and also all Ford models? How will this impact AutoStage hybrid approach? That's a great question. So obviously there's a lot of discussion around AM radio and where it stands today in the vehicle. I will say, there's been positive response from a lot of auto manufacturers to continue to support AM. So I think obviously there are a couple culprits out there that are not as supportive right now for it and have made some decisions around what they're going to include AM or not. So we'll see where that goes. I know there's a huge effort from the New York State Association and NYSBA as a whole. There's some great stuff coming up and the NAB and a bunch of other groups. We're involved in a bunch of those discussions and things like that. So we're very positive about AM radio's future in the car. AutoStage supports AM radio, HD radio supports AM radio. So our technologies for broadcast radio in the car have always supported AM radio as well as FM. And so we're very positive about its future. We think that a hybrid approach is only going to help solidify AM and FM's future in the vehicle. As I talked about with the lyrics, we can deliver lyrics when you're listening to an AM song on the radio. There's no reason why we can't do that, right? Using that connection from the internet, using that IP connection, what we really want to do is we want to make sure that the experience of broadcast radio is that much better inside of the car, right? We want to make sure that as these auto manufacturers are designing these complex screens and these larger screens, we don't want radio to be limited to a logo, standard text, and that's it, right? We want to make sure that they know that radio can do much more than just what they might be used to. Radio can deliver lyrics, radio can deliver events, can deliver broadcast to stream transition, can deliver podcast content, all sorts of things, right? We want to expand the pipeline or expand the feature delivery, the content delivery of what broadcast radio can deliver. And broadcast radio is just that mechanism to discover additional content and try to do things to keep listeners tuned into radio. And so our hope is that, from the AM side, that this hybrid approach will just help AM look better in the car and have a better experience overall. We're actually starting to see some data from AM listening inside of the vehicles today. We're able to see there are listeners on AM that there's an audience there. And so, time will tell to see what we might be able to do with that and how we can help showcase some of that. I was just on with a broadcast group, a network yesterday, actually. Was it yesterday? Yeah, I believe it was yesterday. We were on a call and they had a 50,000 watt AM in the Midwest somewhere. And we pulled up their station. We were able to look at their heat map and see the coverage and listening happening kind of around the market. And it was pretty impressive to see what was going on with that station just on an AM. And so I think, we're starting to see what we can do with some of that and how we can share some of that. But a lot of good stuff hopefully coming in the future around that. And, time will tell where that goes. So as I mentioned, DTS AutoStage is completely free to participate. There is no cost as a broadcaster to get your station signed up. You can reach out to us or reach out to David, and David can connect us. I can get you all the details that you need to get your stations involved and get your stations incorporated into DTS AutoStage. And again, once you get incorporated into DTS AutoStage, we get your stations all connected, everything's populating, the metrics are there, you have control over your stations. That control of your stations is all done through our dashboard or our portal. That is where you control all of the metadata for your stations that get populated into the receivers over IP, not for HD or RDS, but over IP. Station logos, slogans, everything, all of that sort of stuff is handled by you, giving you the control. If your station logo needs to get updated, you update the logo within a matter of minutes. It's corrected in a bunch of vehicles that have DTS AutoStage. It's also the portal where you would access your metrics that are available to you. You would go through that portal. That's where you would actually view the metrics and be able to see the data that's being populated. Again, it's completely free. Reach out to myself, or you can Google DTS AutoStage and get a link to our website, or like I said, or just reach out to David. That's probably easier to reach out to David and the team there, and they can get us connected, and I can get you what you need. To close it out, what I like to try to do is leave you with some actions or something that can be done locally where you're at. Hopefully what you've seen here, and my hope is that you've at least seen that there's some great innovation going on when it comes to broadcast radio in the car, that there are some great things happening, and that some of the radios that are getting out there in the vehicle are really interesting and bringing in new things. And so we're very excited about broadcast radio in the car and its future. And so that's my hope that you've done that. If you're looking to go further, I strongly recommend going to dealers and tuning to your stations. Go to a couple dealerships, and again, don't go to just one, go to 3 or 4. Usually they're all in a park, and just, they're automotive park, and just go walk around to a couple dealerships and take a look at your stations. Take a look at your stations, take a look at some of the competitors, and just play around with the radios and see what's actually happening inside of the vehicle, and see what these auto manufacturers are actually doing inside of the car. I've only shown you just a few pictures and a few cars, but there's so many different radios out there. What we looked at with Mercedes and Hyundai versus what Ford is doing versus what Toyota is doing are all very different. They're all doing different things when it comes to broadcast radio in the car. And so highly encourage you to spend an afternoon and just walk into some dealerships and just get into a car and turn on the radio. You don't even have to drive them. You can just look at a car in the showroom. I was just at a conference in Vancouver, and I went to the auto mall right there, and I visited 4 dealerships to get some local pictures and to see what's happening with radio there in Vancouver. So it's super easy. It doesn't take that long, and I think super, super critical. The other element is make sure you're maximizing your metadata for broadcast. RDS, if you're HD, your pad data, make sure that your RDS data is as accurate as possible, or is great as it can be. If it's dynamic with the now playing data, great. If it's not, make sure that it's just your station name or slogan, things like that. I've met with too many broadcasters where they've said my RDS is frozen and it's stuck on a wrong song, and it's been like that for a year. That is horrific. That is not a good experience for the listener inside of the car, but also just in radio in general. It's not great for a listener to have a radio experience where they get into a car, they see the now playing data that's the wrong text or wrong artist, but they're listening to something different. It's not good for radio. It makes radio look sloppy. It makes radio look bad. It's not great. So just pay attention to that. Make sure that your RDS data, your HD pad data is as great as it can be. Again, if it's not dynamic, with now playing content, at least make sure that it's got your station name or your slogan and it's accurate from that perspective. And if you're HD, make sure you're doing the artwork. Make sure you're sending your station logo at least. And if you can do the artwork, your album artwork, do that. All of that sort of information. I mean, because the brands that are delivering HD radio that have the capability of station logo delivery it's the majority of them. The majority of auto manufacturers that can do that are doing that. So it's super, super important to make sure that you pay attention to that metadata. And I think that will also be influenced by that visit that you make to a couple dealerships. When you get into a car, you see what your stations look like, you see what other stations look like. It'll really help you to understand the importance of that metadata that you're delivering over RDS and HD. And then the last bit is AutoStage. If you want to participate, we'd love to have you if you want to get your stations involved. It's completely free. I can't hammer that enough. It is completely free to participate. So there should be nothing stopping you from getting your stations involved into DTS AutoStage. You can get 75% of the way integrated into DTS AutoStage without getting an engineer involved. There is no hardware. There is literally the majority of it is not technical. So you can get pretty far along with it without getting a technical person involved. And then the last little piece from AutoStage is just, these are the three things that we look at if you want to participate. Your static data, which is station call letters, slogans, things like that. The streaming URL for that broadcast to stream transition. And then the live data, which is like the now playing. And that's typically an export from your automation or your playout. And that is the piece that requires a little bit more technical knowledge to implement. But it's still fairly easy, but is something that would require it. That technical experience. And then with that, I will bring this to an end. Let me just make sure I answered anything and everything. I think I got everything here. As mentioned, we have recorded this. This will get played back. We will share a link for David to distribute to everybody and get this out to everyone to rewatch and maybe do another one over time. But I appreciate everyone's time today, and I appreciate everyone for spending the time to listen to today's webinar. Sorry for the late delay, but we'll talk soon. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. Have a great day.